So this presentation is meant to walk through how a real-time contract compliance program operates day to day. This doesn't have anything around pricing models. This isn't meant to be a sales deck. This is meant to be kind of nuts and bolts. What should you expect in the day in the life or the month in the life of a real-time contract compliance program? So my name is Ben Evans. I am the president of Auditec Solutions. I actually came up in contract compliance auditing. I've been doing this work for over 12 years. Prior to that, I was actually a breach of contract forensic accountant. I've been with Auditec for over 8 years. And so this is really kind of something I'm passionate about. I've spent a lot of time doing historical contract compliance audits, and I'm really a big fan of this real-time model. I feel like it's a better process and really a better mousetrap for our clients and also for the suppliers that they work with. So what does real time mean when we're talking about a contract compliance audit? A traditional contract compliance audit normally looks back 2 to 3 years at historical invoices and looks to create an audit report and findings based on that historical 2 to 3 year period. In comparison, a real-time contract compliance audit is continuous proactive review of supplier invoices as they come in, at the point of the invoice being submitted or near the time of that billing taking place. The audits are conducted throughout the year across many suppliers and contracts, and the findings therefore are addressed in smaller, more frequent, addressable resolutions instead of having a big 3-year audit period that you're looking to resolve findings with. Obviously, this creates a much more manageable resolution process. When I have to go back and audit a supplier for 3 years, and let's say that there was a billing error that was taking place. Well, those billing errors accumulate over a 3-year period. It might be a very large finding at the end of a 3-year period. And so that can make those issues very difficult to resolve with your supplier, because even if they can acknowledge that there was an issue, that accumulation becomes something very difficult to pay back. Well, a real-time contract compliance audit, because we're just looking at a month at a time, we're able to resolve smaller chunk issues and get to resolutions much quicker, and more importantly, stop the errors from taking place immediately. The key outcomes is we have errors that are corrected earlier, we have less disruption to your suppliers, and we have faster recovery for the client. So similar to a traditional contract compliance audit program, a real-time contract compliance audit program is multiple audits, and it's a programmatic structure. Each individual supplier that is being audited is in essence its own audit, and each audit is on its own track. Meaning if I kick off supplier A in January, then I will audit that supplier for a certain period of time until that program is over, starting in January, where supplier B may kick off in March. And that's when the clock starts on the audit for supplier B. There's normally going to be a set time frame that we're looking at that specific supplier, and that set time frame is the track. And the track begins when the initial kickoff comes on. So you'll have a lot of different suppliers starting at different times, operating within their own time track, and you'll have multiple audits that are open at the same time, similar to a traditional contract compliance audit. Audits are kicked off on a rolling basis as suppliers and categories are added. So in any type of contract compliance audit, it's very important to establish a good relationship between the audit firm and the supplier early on in the audit. This is even more important in a real-time contract compliance audit. So as we kick off a real-time contract compliance audit, we look to have an introduction of that process with the supplier on a kickoff call, which is typically done virtually via Microsoft Teams or Zoom. We walk through what the scope, cadence, and expectations of the audit are directly with the supplier. And then we review what contracts we're looking at, rate cards, and billing mechanics directly with the supplier early on in the engagement. More so than a traditional contract compliance audit, we find ourselves on site at the supplier environment trying to establish that relationship and that kind of cooperative relationship with the supplier early on to walk through their billing systems and really understand how they're generating their invoices, what data those invoices are coming from, and how that data flows. So that as invoices start to flow through to the audit firm, we're able to have intelligent and thoughtful conversations with the supplier around where gaps and breakage and leakage may be occurring. Really want to make sure in a real-time contract compliance audit that we're establishing what I like to say is we work with the supplier to bring back a good result to our shared client, right? A very collaborative, cooperative approach. This upfront investment really reduces friction later in the audit process. I'm a big believer in these real-time contract compliance audits. One of the number one reasons why that's the case is because I do think there's less friction and there's more of a partnership taking place between the audit firm and the suppliers for our clients. So once a audit is kicked off with a supplier, what does the general cadence look like from the supplier perspective? We look to have monthly, regular touch points with the supplier. As invoices are coming in, we're going to be discussing the invoice flow. Hey, when are invoices going to be coming in? When should we be expecting them? Data availability. What data sets can we utilize on the supplier side or on the client side to be able to test some of these issues? And then any emerging trends or occurring issues, we'll be addressing those directly with the suppliers. The idea is we want to be addressing issues as we're seeing them on this month's invoices before they become large disputes, before we have large findings that need to be settled over multiple years. Suppliers prefer this generally, or why this matters is because suppliers understand the issues as they arise. There's less surprises, especially as you move into month 6, 7, 8 of a real-time contract compliance audit. We've already discussed the issues with the suppliers. They understand what expectations are, and we're able to find and resolve. We're able to resolve our findings in much more small, manageable increments. What is happening on a day-to-day basis in a real-time contract compliance audit? Here's what's happening. We're going to be collecting supplier invoices as they are issued. We are going to be reviewing them against contract terms, pricing schedules, rate cards, quantities, billing logic, expectations as they come through. As we identify potential overcharges, I think the slide says overcharges, but as we identify potential overcharges, potential pricing errors, and any non-compliant billings, we'll be raising those issues with the supplier, generally through email. But if there are larger issues that make sense to jump on a call and discuss with the supplier in a face-to-face virtual meeting, we'll do that as well. It's not a one-time event. The idea is to be working with the supplier back and forth over time to be able to have an operational process of reviewing billings in real time. This is a slide I really like. What does it feel like as a client? So when we're working with our clients, what does it feel like as a client to be working in a real-time contract compliance environment? We look to have weekly or sometimes every other week meetings with our clients, just like we would in a normal traditional contract compliance program. We look to raise the issues as we're seeing them, but typically they're lighter weight topics, especially when we talk about the scale and scope of the findings, because we're looking month to month. So if we're having an update call today with one of my clients, I'm walking through and saying, hey, here's what I'm seeing in supplier A's billings. I'm having discussions with supplier A. Here's the feedback we've gotten so far. Here's the processes we're going through to make sure this doesn't happen. And if there are any repayments or deductions that need to take place in the real-time contract compliance program, we're talking about how that actually looks and how those dollars ultimately roll back and get deducted on the client side. The agenda typically includes new findings, status of open items, trends across suppliers, and any operational blockers. The idea is that these meetings keep our clients fully informed without overburdening them. One thing that's really nice on the client side that we see in a real-time contract compliance audit as opposed to a traditional is there's a lot less meetings around settlement, right? If we do a traditional contract compliance audit program and we're going across 20 different suppliers and we start to have $100,000 to multi-million-dollar findings on some of those suppliers, there's a lot of discussions that need to go into settlement strategy and settlement approach. We have infinitely less of those meetings in a real-time contract compliance meeting program because the findings aren't as large. They're monthly issues and we're resolving them before they become large, right? I always use the analogy that it's marriage counseling and not divorce consulting. We're raising the issues that are straining the relationship or should strain the relationship, and we're with the idea of making the relationship better between your supplier and yourself. So some of this slide is going to be redundant with what I've already said in previous slides, but I think it's a good summary. So the settlement and resolution model. What are key differences we see in a real-time contract compliance audit versus a traditional contract compliance audit? As I've already mentioned, there's no single large settlement event that happens at the end of this audit because we're working through the issues month by month as they're seen. That is big. If you've done contract compliance audit work before in the past, you know what I mean when I say it's a challenge to go back and settle 3 years of findings right now. Because even if the supplier was wrong and there was a mistake that took place and they admit that they're wrong, that can be a pretty large check to write or a pretty large deduction to take place. Instead of having that large resolution, we're able to resolve these findings in smaller chunks. We have express deductions, credits, or corrections that are applied closer to when the transaction occurs. In most cases, what we see deductions taking place in the following month. One thing I want to call out in this presentation, I don't really have it on the slides, is when we do a real-time contract compliance audit, we never slow down the payment process. So if I'm in January of 2026, I'm reviewing findings, I see potential errors, the client will go ahead and pay that supplier the full amount of the invoice regardless of what I'm finding. And then if we have issues that I'm working through with the supplier that end up being monies that are owed back to our clients, there'll be deductions on following invoices in following months. This is critical because paying your vendors, paying your suppliers is the most important thing to keep your business operating. So we have those deductions and credits that take place after we perform the review with the express agreement and understanding of the suppliers as we work with them in a spirit of cooperation. The result is we have fewer settlement strategy meetings, as I mentioned before. And when I say fewer, infinitely less meetings, which can be a huge time saver over a traditional contract compliance audit program. We have less escalation, so less friction, less emotional energy going up to different levels within your organization, and more predictable outcomes. We can really kind of see a higher realization on the dollars we identify coming in as dollars that are recovered, that are deducted or received via check and recovered on your side, because we're dealing with these issues when they're stemming up and not having them accumulate over a 3-year period. Again, why are fewer settlement meetings needed in a real-time contract compliance audit than a traditional contract compliance audit? Well, in traditional audits, we have a large look-back period, large aggregated claims, heavy negotiations back and forth at the end. Compared to that real-time model, continuous validation, smaller dollars per issue, and suppliers are already engaged throughout the process and are really working in a spirit of partnership and collaboration with the audit firm on the findings. Settlement becomes operational, not adversarial. It's not one large event. It's kind of the process of getting better from invoice to invoice and making sure that we have accuracy from invoice to invoice. A much better process, in my opinion. So at Auditec Solutions, our tagline is collaborative audits, clear results. Probably isn't the catchiest tagline in the industry, but it was very intentional. We spent a lot of time making sure it was aligned with our DNA. I think in the previous slides, you can understand where that whole collaborative audits approach comes in when we're talking about a real-time contract compliance audit. But also, we want clear results. We want transparency. So as you do a real-time contract compliance audit with Auditec Solutions, we want to make sure there's really good ongoing visibility. As we've already mentioned, there'll be weekly updates and summaries with a lot of very good consumable reporting that can be used by your audit team to understand what's going on with the audit. But more importantly, it can be utilized by the business team. So if you have a supplier that's in the HVAC services space, or you have a supplier that's in fleet, or you have a supplier that's doing construction work, they're able to see exactly what's going on in the audit at any specific point in time with clear graphics and charts that make it very simple to understand. You'll have clear tracking of when the audits were kicked off, what findings are identified, what dollars have been recovered and corrected, and what's not on the slide, but I think is even more important, is what resolutions are taking place and are in the process of being taken place to make sure that those findings don't continue to crop up. How do we make sure that if a supplier is billing a fee that's not contractual, that it's not going to show up in future invoices? That is also in the reporting. We have a scorecard that can be requested at any point in time by a specific business owner for a specific audit that shows exactly where we're at and what's happening and what changes are taking place. So this is super useful when it comes to being able to show value, show not only the recovered dollars, but actual resolutions. Clients can see their progress in near real time throughout the process of the audit. You don't have to wait, a year, 6 months to a year to complete the audit, work through the process of settlement. and then hope that we get some changes and improvements in the billing processes, you're seeing those things happen almost immediately in real time. And we are now to the summary slide. The idea of this slide is just to walk through bullet points of everything we've discussed so far. So in summary, how does a real-time contract compliance audit program operate from day to day? In simple terms, we have continuous invoice review as invoices are coming through on a month-to-month basis. We're having regular supplier communication between Auditec or the audit firm and the suppliers that are being audited. We have weekly, sometimes every other week, depending on what the preference is of the client, touch points with the client where we're talking about what issues are coming up, what recoveries and deductions are coming in, and what improvements are being made in those supplier relationships. We have faster, much smaller resolutions that are happening with express supplier and vendor approval directly with the supplier and vendor and the audit firm, in this case, Auditec Solutions, and really require much less feedback and strategy in resolution from the client. We have fewer end of audit disruptions. We've done this work with a lot of companies. We've audited a lot of suppliers under this model that have also been audited under the traditional contract compliance model. And I'm yet to hear one that doesn't prefer a real-time contract compliance audit, because your vendors, the good ones, which is 99.9% of your vendors and suppliers, want to do good work for you. They want to work with you as a good partner. And this allows them to identify and fix issues early. And so they can get that relationship up and working instead of having to accumulate and have large arguments over significant findings that accumulate over a 3-year period. Bottom line, real-time contract compliance is an operating model, not just an audit. The idea is that we're continually looking at these things. We're looking at things close to the transaction. We're getting resolutions when resolutions should take place. Or making fixes as quickly as we can so that the relationships and the billings are operating the way they're supposed to. If you've gotten this far in the presentation, I just want to thank you for walking through it. If you have questions about real-time contract compliance auditing, if you might potentially be interested in doing an audit with Auditec Solutions, feel free to reach out to me. The best method would probably be just to ping me on LinkedIn. Look me up as Ben Evans, Auditec Solutions on LinkedIn, or to shoot me an email at ben.evans@auditecsolutions.com. Appreciate your time. Thank you.